So today I want to talk to you guys about what career story are you writing today. If I plotted my career on a roadmap when I was a young boy, it would probably look something like this. Okay? At that time, I had ambitious and lofty goals in my career. I learned, though, over time that in your career, every role, every opportunity you get, every skill you develop is part of your story. So to be successful, you need to take value from every single opportunity you get. You need to build a brand by building relationships and then demonstrating your value. You don't get anywhere on your own, but also your career is yours to make. You're the one who needs to care the most about your career. I want to tell you my career story today. In every opportunity I've had, I've learned something from it. I've gone forward, I've gone backwards, I've taken sideways steps, I've taken odd jobs, ones I loved, ones I didn't love. But what has developed over time is a core set of values. So the first is having an owner's mindset. I've had the pleasure of working really close with a lot of great owners and managers and building strong relationships with them. As someone they can trust, someone who always puts their hand up for other responsibilities, someone who goes the extra mile, I was able to get a lot of opportunities. The second is hard work and being focused on achieving something. With this focus, I was relentless in getting to where I wanted to go. And when things didn't work out, I reassessed and I took a new step, and sometimes I went in a different direction. The third is placing value on learning and development. As a practical hands-on learner, I found learnings through trying new things, testing multiple approaches, and taking challenges that I thought were difficult. On top of my work, I've always put my hand up for other courses that have come up. I also sought courses out that fit with the things I was passionate about, including taking that approach to university. And agreed to certain outcomes with people in order to get these courses. So when I was 14 years old, a friend of mine, Jamie, was talking to my best friend, Andrew. And he said, "My dad has a job available for you." All Andrew needed to do was make his CV up and go to the store and drop it off, and boom, he had the job. But I knew Andrew didn't really want a job, even though he said, yes, he would do that. I knew his parents didn't want him to have a job, and I knew he was a procrastinator. So I rode home on my bike, and I put my 3 years of paper route into my CV and went over to the store, introduced myself, and got the job on the spot. I started that weekend with some really prestigious jobs, like cleaning the bathroom, cutting boxes, shoveling the snow, and my favorite job, brushing the 400 plus suits free of dust in the store. One day, I went to the tailor's. This was something I did very often, dropping garments off at the tailor's. The tailor asked me, "Do you brush suits?" I said, "Yes." He said, "That's great. Would you like to come and brush suits here, part-time?" So I took the role, and I was rewarded with minimum wage, and for some reason he always offered me cranberry juice. I hated this role, but I did it for about 4 or 5 months. One day, I asked my manager if I could start to sell, if I could go on commission, and he said he would think about it. He offered me a 25-cent raise and told me he would teach me how to sell. More and more, I got opportunities to test this out in between my regular responsibilities. And in one summer, my boss became really ill and went into hospital, and one of our full-timers quit. So all of a sudden, I was thrust into full-time work at 15. And I can tell you, I earned a lot of money, but I spent every cent of it, right? When I left, I didn't have a dime. And when a similar situation arose, a friend of mine leaving a car rental agency, I went over to that agency, dusted off my CV, introduced myself, and got that job. In all of these roles, I worked directly for the owner of the business. I went to their house, I knew their family, I had a role to play in their well-being, right? And this added value and brought me pride in my roles. And the relationships I remember vividly. In so many ways, these people were mentors to me, and although I didn't really realize it at the time, I think about it now, it's definitely shaped me as an individual. A few years later, after a brief stint at uni, I decided to follow my passion and go back to playing in a band. Okay? I took 2 jobs to pay for this. Stock boy by day, sales rep by night. Both companies were corporates. So this was my first foray into that. And people had little commitment in these corporates. I didn't have great managers. There wasn't a good culture. One of those businesses no longer exists. It went out of business. The second job, though, The Source, sold mobile phones. So I had a mobile phone for a few years at that point, and I was one of the first in my group of friends. I remember selling my first mobile phone. It was really complicated at the time. Working in sales again, though, rekindled my passion, and it really made me clear that I love to talk to people and I love to sell. So after about 3 months, I moved to Ottawa to continue playing in my band. Earlier I mentioned what my career roadmap would have looked like in my younger days. In my early 20s, it probably wouldn't have changed too much. So I got a job again as a sales rep, again for The Source. But this time my manager, also named Geoff, owned the store. It would turn out that we would become very close. I remember late nights when we worked together, he would drop me off because it was too cold for me to take the bus. In hindsight, he was an inspiration to me and a mentor. He gave me opportunities to develop and lead targets, deliver training, and be the liaison with Rogers, who was our mobile phone supplier. That's who we resold. And he promoted me to sales manager, despite the position not existing. We operated at first with a larger team, especially at Christmas time. But Geoff wanted to experiment with all kinds of different staff sizes and shifts. We tried all kinds of different ways of doing it. We tried 2 12-hour days and 2 8-hour days with a 3-day weekend. We all thought it was great. We burnt out. The turnover started to get higher, and then we got robbed. $15,000 worth of merchandise stolen. And the worst part, we suspected the job was inside. This really broke Geoff's spirit, and he started to resign back to the status quo. I didn't get the opportunities I got before because he had none for me. I decided to part ways with Geoff and the Source. He would do the same later that year. I moved to Australia on a whim to experience something new and to find myself. My band broke up too. So when I got to Australia, I spent a ton of time challenging myself. I would go to movies by myself. I would go to restaurants by myself. I met strangers on the bus and I would travel with them. I went up to a lifestyle block outside of Byron Bay and got into meditation, which I really needed at the time. When I arrived in Melbourne, I printed my CV and I went cafe to cafe looking for a job. I had never worked in hospitality before, but I knew I could talk to people and I knew I could serve them. Every day I would hand out resumes, and then I would go and check the prices for flights back to Canada. I was getting to a breaking point where I was about to run out of money to buy a flight home. So I needed to find a job, or I needed to go home. But I decided that was actually going to be a cool challenge. So I treated myself to dinner that night. I was offered a role as front of house, and I tried to pick up the job. Frankly, I was terrible at it. But I was friendly and energetic, and I curried favor with the manager, who agreed to put me behind the till to collect cash and give change. It was something I was good at. During that time, I also lived in a backpackers, and I made friends with the social coordinator. I made a point of that. When she finished her role, she gave it to me. So I got a second job. For 4 months, I traveled, I worked, I enjoyed life. But Melbourne taught me more than what I wanted to do. It taught me what I didn't want to do. I definitely didn't want to work in hospitality. I definitely didn't want to live in a backpackers. And I wasn't too keen on spending every single night drinking and going out smoking. Although, fun at times. So I packed my things and I went back to Ottawa. I had $14 in my bank account. I remember going into the bank and asking what my balance was. The lady said $14. I said, I'll have it all, please. I used that $14 to buy a SIM card, print some resumes, and start the job search again. I had some relationships with advertising companies in the past, which I was able to leverage for part-time work every now and again. And sleeping on a friend's couch, I waited it out until I got my university loan. I then got a job at a telco shop. It was little responsibility, it wasn't really challenging, but it fit my lifestyle, it funded my studies. It was another corporate and I had multiple bosses. The first boss stole, the second boss didn't know any of the plans, and the third boss was really, really, really slow with customers. But they were really nice and accommodating to me because I always worked hard for them. I remember one day a colleague of mine, Chen, who was new to sales, was talking to a customer and had forgot to mention the $50 credit that we were offering. I wandered over and reminded him nicely. When the sale finished and the customer left, he came to me and said, "Don't ever do that again." I said, "Why? I'm just trying to help." He said, "Yeah, but I was going to use that $50 credit to sell a bunch of accessories, and you screwed it up." And I thought about it. That's a good idea. So I started to watch him. And eventually I adapted that tactic. I thought I was the expert in sales, but you learn something new every day. After uni, I moved to New Zealand at 27 with my partner, and I was determined to find another industry outside the telco industry. I applied for every sales job I could find, but it was hard with a temporary visa. I got one call back, door-to-door team leader with telecom. I studied everything I could about the New Zealand industry, and I nailed that job interview because I had to. I started in a temporary role with Kelly's, and it was chaos. The first team leader, the other team leader was let go within the first month. I focused on building out training because that's what I had known I had done in the past. That was the experience I had had. We became a permanent operation after about a year because of our success. I met a lot of amazing people through that role, and although it was incredibly hard work, I got so many opportunities, like seeing New Zealand. I also took learning and development courses in lieu of any salary increase, and I asked for the opportunity to write a national training program. Because of this, I made an advocate in my boss, Dexter, who, when his role became available, he convinced me to apply. And then he sold his boss on me harder than I think anyone's ever sold me in my life. When I became door-to-door sales and operations manager, I knew I needed to continue building on our brand across the company to keep the channel alive. It had been suggested at multiple times that door-to-door be stopped and ceased. As a way to add value to the business, we provided insights that no other channel could because we were the outbound-facing channel. Specific insights regarding fiber and the complexity of it got me involved in working in groups with people across the business, and I built relationships and I built the channel brand. Having an advocate in Dexter made it easier for me to get an advocate out of my new boss, Greg. I had been asked by him, using my fiber knowledge, if I could solve a customer problem we were having, which was new fiber into new apartment buildings. Ultimately, this put me in front of my next boss, Grant, and it gave him confidence that I could be brought into his team, and he brought me in. I was nominated as the sales lead for the fiber war room, and later onto the wireless team to launch and support these new products. We again focused on learning and development to plug the gaps and build foundational knowledge across the business. During the time, there were also a handful of courses that really fit to what I wanted to learn, specifically in leadership and commercial acumen. There were also a couple left of field courses like Jolt mindset training, where we started with meditation, and design thinking, which is where all the Post-its come from. It was at that time I also learned about the Destinator, the roadmap. So I started to use it and think about what I wanted to achieve. And here's what I ended up with. I traveled to New Zealand, and I traveled all over New Zealand. I focused on being more supportive with my people because I wasn't showing up that way. I studied commercial acumen to better understand the business, the requirements that I was responsible for. I joined a softball team. I was nominated to the Fiber War Room. I was brought onto the wireless team. I participated in social bowls, which I still do to this day. I got engaged, and I started getting fit for the wedding. One of the most impactful learners was planning out my destinator. The roadmap that I want to take, it helped me to further focus on achievement, and for the first time, I started to get a plan of where I wanted to go. Last year, Spark went through another restructure, and it was incredibly disruptive. Over the course of a couple months, I deeply thought about what I wanted to do. I absolutely wanted to finish what I had started with my team, but I also wanted to find something new. I wanted to gain new experiences. During the process, I applied for the head of contact center role, and I wasn't successful. I was really disappointed about that. I met with a colleague who could tell I was disappointed, and he said to me, I understand that you're upset, but when is your reset moment? And I asked him, well, what do you mean? He said, this is not you. You don't come to work upset. You don't come to work in a failed state. So how long is it going to take you to get back on track and then come into work ready to go? And that's what I did. So in the last 8 months, these are some of the milestones that I've achieved that have been on my roadmap for many years. I got married. We combined the outbound channels, and this was a huge daunting task that I'm enjoying every minute of. I kept my softball team alive by leading the team, and I got my permanent residency. Now we're going into Agile, okay? And I'm ready for Agile because I've got a plan. In the short term, I know I need to focus on empowerment, not management, because that is the reality in the Agile world. I've been playing squash because I learned a healthy lifestyle is just that, a lifestyle. I'm committed to obtaining my NZ citizenship over the next 3 years. My wife and I, we're going to travel to South America in August. I've never been there. I'm really excited. I'm incredibly anxious about it. But I'll also get to visit my family, who I don't get to see very often. I'm also been asked to run the softball league. So more than just running the team, which I'm really excited about next year. I'm going to shift to Agile. And I'm going to be part of the change and more so lead the change, because that's how I know I can influence it. And outside of work, I spend all kinds of time studying up on Agile ways of working so that I can help guide us in the right direction so that we can get there before we're forced to get there. And all the stuff that Spark gave me, like Jolt mindset training and design thinking, has built a lot of those foundations that has made it easier for me. Ultimately, I love people and I want to lead more people. So all my experiences have helped guide me through the unknown, but it's never a sure thing. Agile scares me sometimes. I've worked really hard for my manager title, so what if it's taken away? But I realize, to me, it's never been about title. It's always been about the people and the relationships, being hardworking and achievement focused, and learning every step of the way. And when it didn't work out for me, I got on to the next thing. So I want to ask all of you, how are you getting on? What are you learning? And who are your advocates? I want to be clear that this is my story and it's not your story. And your path will be different to mine. You'll have ups and downs, and your story may not end the way you had imagined. But the great thing is you're still writing it. So I just leave you with one simple question, which is, what career story are you writing today? Thanks. So any questions?
You mentioned Jolt,
Yeah.
mindset training and design thinking. Can you kind of elaborate on what each of those two things are?
Yep. So Jolt mindset training was a 9-week course. It was 2 hours every day. What it taught me was, one, to be in the moment. So being in that for 2 hours and shutting everything else out We started with a meditation, we ended with a meditation, and we did a lot around connecting with one another. The thing it taught me most was mostly around healthiness, so things around drinking lots of water, getting good rest. It also taught me about the brain a little bit, that the brain remembers things in patterns. And, you know, for me, I'm someone who thinks about things and feels like I have to write them all down. But I've learned over time that I can think about something and it's likely to come back up the next day because there are triggers in your life that pull those out and remind you of those things you had thought about. So that was Jolt. The design thinking really was all about the problem that you have to solve. So not jumping to solutions and instead spending lots of time understanding the problem and specifically understanding the problem, not the symptoms of the problem. So what that means is, you know, a lot of times we deal with issues like, you know, customers don't understand their bill, okay? That's a symptom of the problem, which is that overall our bills are confusing. It's not just one person's issue. So it's actually a total billing issue. It also taught us to work in more of iterations. And so that's where you see a lot of the Post-it notes to be able to put things forward, put ideas forward and move them along. And what that does is you constantly think about it. So therefore you keep coming up with ideas to build on it rather than, you know, come up with an idea, spend months solutioning it, deliver it, and then go, oh, it's not fit for purpose. So that is one of the things that I found really helpful in being able to operate day to day.
Is there a way to join the Jolt mindset and design thinking courses?
So there's no longer a way to join Jolt or design thinking. They're both programs that don't exist anymore, but there is a company called IDEO. It's IDEO. You can search them online. A lot of the design thinking principles have come from them. There's also Google's design sprint theories, which are also the foundations. So the idea that you get a multi-purpose team in a room together to solve a problem from all different angles.
I mean, I guess with Spark going agile, you know, we're being told to think about where you want to be within the company and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
What is some advice you can kind of give us to think about where we want to go or think about how to get where we want to go?
Yep. So if you're trying to plan a route to get into Agile, I think the first thing is, you know, what are you doing in your role that is thinking about opportunities? So what opportunities are you seeing that we might not be because we're not on the calls with the customers all the time? And then how are you raising those to your team leader? I think the idea really around Agile is you have to be willing to shift from wanting all the answers to helping find the answers. And that makes the biggest difference. So, you know, coming with a problem isn't really what we're looking for, but coming with a problem and some ideas around a solution or maybe how to get to a solution is the best way that you can prepare yourself. And then also, I think just, you know, nobody really knows what Agile does. I mean, there aren't a lot of companies, there aren't any companies in New Zealand that have done it successfully. They're doing pockets of it, but there are companies overseas who have done it. There are papers from McKinsey on it. There is stuff out there, but it's a concept that's brought together through multiple concepts. So again, I think for you guys, it's all about, you know, build your CV. My father gave me some advice a long time ago, which was update your CV every year. Find those things you've done that you can put on there and be proud about and know those well. So when you go into an interview, you can talk about, hey, these are the 3 things I've done. And I think as well, it's, you know, I spend quite a bit of time watching TV, but I watch a lot of documentaries, TED Talks, and small documentaries. Vice is one of my favorites. Vox is one of my favorites. So the reason I say that is because a lot of people leave work and they shut off. And that means that the only things you're learning are the job that you're doing now. If you want to learn about other jobs, or if you want to at least learn skills, you kind of need to grow your learning, and you got to find things on your own. And that can be difficult, and those go in lulls and highs for people. but there's all kinds of things out there. So I think it's also asking yourself when you're at home, am I vegging out and shutting off? And if you're thinking about your destinators, what are some of those skills you want to learn about? And even if you can just say there's one thing I want to learn about and achieve it, that will make a big difference.